Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Blake Harper. I work on the trust strategy team here at Meta. If you're anything like me, some of your favorite experiences in VR are the social ones. And maybe also some of your least favorite experiences can be social ones too. So if you're interested in how you can make social shine in your experiences, you're in the right place, because we have 3 incredible panelists who have a lot of experience and expertise in these areas to help you figure out how to make the most of social in your titles or worlds or experiences in VR. So to my left, Wes Hart, Head of Player Dynamics and Community Standards at Riot Games. Tammy Lin, Distinguished Professor, College of Communications at National Chengchi University in Taiwan. And Yasmin Hussain, Head of Trust and Safety at Rec Room. So we're going to get into this, talk a little bit about positive play, what we're talking about at all when we talk about that, tactics that you can take away and start building into your experiences right now, and then why any of this matters, kind of the business case for doing this so you can sell it to the rest of your teams. And then we'll have some time at the end for questions, and come see us obviously after if there's more to discuss. So great, that'll be it. First, Wes, what are we talking about when we're talking about positive play? Maybe how has the industry evolved from thinking about safety in terms of kind of reactive block, mute, report to where we are now?
Well, I got to admit, I spent a lot of time thinking about this question. Actually, prior to being invited to this, it was probably 6 months of work of myself and others to come up with a good definition for positive play, and we ended up somewhere very different. But the definition that I would use at this point is positive play, or at least a positive multiplayer experience, is when players feel good about themselves, feel good about their interactions with others, and that they're getting good at something. And it took a really long time to get to that definition, but one word really began to come to mind that really sums it up, which is thriving. And this might seem like a leap. So I recognize if you're thinking about safety, getting to the idea of thriving, it's probably going to seem like a bridge too far. So the analogy that I use to explain why we're using this definition, and I say why, or we rather, it includes the Thriving in Games group, formerly known as Fair Play Alliance. Like, we've renamed ourselves around this concept. And it's been kind of a journey that you can see as a river with rapids in the middle, and your game is really the river. So when most of us get into this space, we're downstream from the rapids. When damage has been done, when players might have been hurt, harassment, hate, things that look like disruptive behavior, and that downstream area is where we generally focus on consequences, punitive measures, these sorts of things. You spend enough time in this space, you start thinking, could we get ahead of this? Could we get ahead of the rapids, if you will, a little bit? And you start thinking about incentivization. That's one of the key words when you've made it to like the midstream section. And you think about, can we encourage them? Think about reputation systems, not so much about punitive measures, but can we reward them? But you spend enough time there, you start to realize that if you focus upstream and that the whole river is something you need to consider, the opportunities are much greater. Now, I'm not saying you don't think about consequences and encouragement. You absolutely do. But when you're thinking about putting players together, low trust strangers, into high stakes situations, you should not be surprised when things don't turn out that great, right? It's being thrown onto a team anywhere and saying, you got to be amazing right now and you all have to go do it. It's really kind of unfair. But as you look at the analogy and say, all right, we're going to put players on a boat. They've got to work together to get to the bottom, right? What do we need to think about? Well, that's where the opportunities are greater. That's when you can think about the full definition of thriving. So we want them to feel good about themselves. So the activities need to be something that as individuals, it makes them feel good. They need to feel good about their interactions with others. You got to be designing for trust. Don't hope for trust and positivity. Hope is out of scope, right? If you want to be successful, you need to be thinking about that up front. So what can we do to help players build trust so when they work well together, it feels really good? And how do we help them know that they're getting good at something? Because we're all hardwired for these feelings, right, as humans. And so as game designers, especially in VR, your opportunities are far greater. The depth of effect is much greater. So if you start putting the pieces together, like we want them to thrive, to feel they're thriving for moments of time, right? And you do this through helping them feel good about themselves, those interactions with others, and that they're getting good at something. And you go downriver and make sure you're encouraging, and you still think about the consequences at the end, because some disruptive behavior is going to happen. By the way, you probably won't hear me use the word toxicity. We can talk about that later. There's a good reason for that. But in the end, if they feel they're thriving, right, it's good for you. Because if they thrive, we thrive. And so that's the definition that I generally orient around.
Yeah, I love this emphasis on both thriving and feeling, because one of the unique, I think, promises of VR is how visceral it can feel and how wonderful it can feel when you get the thriving right with other people. So Tammy, maybe you can tell us a little bit from your research about like, what is it that makes VR unique here that we should be thinking about when we're building games?
Okay, so virtual reality is unique, and it has unique affordances to distinguish itself from other computing system or media. For example, it's very different from digital games. So usually there's a term for that to distinguish all things from VR from others. It's called immersion. And there are 3 affordances to construct this immersion. So usually for VR, we compare VR with reality. So like mediated face-to-face interaction, just like in reality. We don't compare it with digital games in 2D environment or projected to the screen because it's totally different. So I'm going to be talking about 3 unique affordances and then talk about their potential social benefits. And also when we conclude the 3 unique affordances, I'll be talking about the risk behind it. So the first one is called place illusion, or you can call it self-location for presence. So that means that you feel like you're actually there. We are all VR users. We know what that means, right? But for non-VR users, they never understand it. So once you try it on, you know, oh, I'm actually there. So a really good example is that I myself, representing my school, NCCU, this year, I signed an MOU with Michigan State University in the US. And then what we did is we invited professors from my university in Taiwan and professor from California and professor from Michigan. We all logged in into workroom from Meta. And then we really felt that we're all together in the same shared space. And then we can sign the MOU one by one across the table. And then we can switch places and then hug and then slap each other's face. And then, stand up. We eventually stood up to have a group photo. So one of my students had to be the cameraman and she's like, organize us and have a group photo. That's the amazing thing that VR actually brought us together in the same shared room. So I'm sorry, my note card just dropped. So I thank you so much. Yeah, so actually there are lots of literature showing that by just changing the environment inside VR can actually decrease people's stress and also increase the restoration of their mood and increase their subjective well-being. And the second unique affordance is called plausibility illusion. Also, we can call them possible actions of presence. That means that although these virtual events never happen in real life, but you feel like they're actually happening to you, like the zombie, attacking you from behind or everything. So there are really good pro-social evidence actually here. So the study from the US, they construct this virtual family room for the military families so that they can unite with their families every night. They can hug and they can engage in social activities every night with their families because they're so different, distant from each other. So there's evidence showing also that using social VR, including VR Chat, Rec Room, and Horizon, can actually increase the social connectedness among people and also increase their psychological well-being. So that's the second one. The third one is virtual body illusion. We seldom talk about how that influences us, right? So the virtual body is very different from other virtual bodies on the screen or on your mobile phone. So imagine if you're playing Wii Fit, you saw your avatars running on the screen, right? And then once you look down, you immediately know that the avatar is not you because you had the belly, but the avatar doesn't, right? But in VR, you look down, you actually see your embody virtual body here. And when you move your hands and your body, it moves like what you did, right? So this kind of thing, like the movement and also the visual thing, will make your brain slowly adapt that the virtual body is yours. It's called rubber hand illusion in psychology field, but in VR it's called virtual body illusion. So studies have shown that if you embody people with other ethnicity, like for example, they put Caucasians into African Americans' body, they feel like I'm not different from them. So they reduce bias toward the out group or other people. So it actually increase empathy and to make you understand different roles and different issues and all things. So this is the third illusion. So all this construct immersion. And so because it's just like the reality, it's just like, we interact with each other. So in VR, there comes risk regarding this kind of social VR. For example, I once was in social VR having conversations with others, and there's a kid rushing into me and pick my nose. and I went through a guy, and he's like, apparently he's sleeping, but then I can hear he snoring like on my ears. Oh my goodness. So this kind of like body groping and harassment is just like, you see it, you don't get touched, but you felt uncomfortable. So how to construct a safe and in control experiences to build the trust, was just talked about, is very important in social VR.
Yeah, and one of those like media for feeling that immersion is the proximate voice chat, right? When we're next to each other, in VR, we feel like we really are next to each other, and we hear each other like we're next to each other. So Yasmin, obviously, y'all have been on a really successful journey with voice chat in Rec Room. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've learned over the years with this, and how that contributes to positive social experiences in Rec Room?
Oh, it's really easy.
Yeah.
Well, just to provide some context, so Rec Room, Tammy's already explained it, I think, better than I can. You can play, you can create, so we're on 9 platforms at the moment, so we're not just VR, and I will touch on this later. I think that's really important, because when you're mixing different platforms together, it does change the dynamics. But we started as VR, so we were VR first. VR was our first love. And we are soon to be on 10. We are launching on Nintendo Switch later this year. So that will, thank you. We're quite proud of that one too. And voice is key. So we use AI, as I think many people do when they're thinking about these things. The issue with using something like AI, as has already been touched on, is that the harm has already happened once you've detected it, right? So it had to happen for the AI to be able to know that it had happened. And what we are really trying to do is evolve how we use these tools. So we stopped them being reactive and in the moment, and turned a reactive tool into a proactive, preventative tool. So, like, how the hell do you do that? We started with consistent standards. Like, the first thing is that when you are moderating voice, your players have to know what the rules are, and you have to enforce it consistently. So we have a code of conduct. It's very simple. It's everywhere. We'll get back onto this later, I think, with other little tactics. But voice is everywhere. So that's the first thing, consistent standards. And then the second thing was, okay, what is the appropriate moderation action? We weren't super good at that, because what we found was that most of our players were super well behaved. They actually weren't doing anything when we turned this on in all places, all times. The people who were violating and perhaps using voice language that we didn't like were doing it once. They were slipping up. I confess, I will probably slip up during the course of this panel. And it's like, but we were treating them like exactly the same as the people who were violating over and over and over again, coming down like really firmly. It was a really bad experience for them. You're having a bad day already. Maybe someone's done something to you. We haven't maybe set you up for success. And then we're giving you a ban. Bad experience. Like, we're reinforcing that. So we did a bunch of experimentation. And one of it was around, what is the appropriate moderation action for us to take when you slip up? And we tested warnings, like a really gentle, supportive warning. We tested a stronger, firmer warning. We did mutes of varying lengths. We did bans. And what we found was that short mutes were actually super effective. It was there, it was in the moment. It's very visceral. Like, hey, you said something that you shouldn't have, that wasn't in line with our community standards, and now you can't speak. You can really see the connection between the thing you did and the consequence you received. So that worked well. And like, bans are interesting because it's I think it's a shortcut, actually. It removes the instance in the moment that player can't violate, they can't offend, but you haven't really changed their behavior. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. The core question is, how do we use this tool to change player behavior? So the mute worked really well. And then once we'd done that, we started looking at, well, who's really responsible for this stuff that we're seeing? Who are the people who are violating over and over again? And it was actually really interesting. It was a tiny population of people who were responsible for the majority of our violations. So then the question was not, well, how do we change player behavior? It was, how do we change the behavior of this very small cohort of players who are the repeat violators? Like, what's going on with them? So what we ended up doing was introducing stacking interventions. So the first time we catch you, it's a warning. The second time, it's a short mute. The third time, perhaps it's a slightly longer mute, so that you really have to be going over and over again, and those interventions will get longer. It's a firmer reaction. So what we've seen is that the number of people violating has come down. It's a smaller group. They are still persistent, so there's other things that we will get onto. But the headline is like, it's working, which is good news, otherwise I probably shouldn't be here, or I'd be talking about all of the failures. So we've reduced, by using this iterative approach, like experiment after experiment, lots of quick learning loops, we've seen toxicity come down by over 70% over the last year. What happens next, like evolution 4 and 5 and 6, I think there are spaces for us around, it's actually not enough for justice to be done in a game if we are muting someone and we are giving them a short ban. Other players need to feel and see that too. Like, we need to tell them, they need to know that we are consistently enforcing our standards, not just against them, but against other people too. And starting to move into better rewards for people who are doing the right thing. So this is very focused on trying to change behavior if we start detecting that you are slipping up. But what about encouraging and detecting all of that really positive play that we started the question with?
Right. That journey is incredible. There are so many who might just plug in an automated voice solution and just sort of, we're done here. But clearly at Rec Room, that's not the way you do it. You adapt and learn over time with these things. Tammy, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how player expectations for moderation kind of fit in with all this.
So we did a study comparing how people view trolling and toxicity regarding gaming platforms and also social media. And we found that to influence their perception toward toxicity toward these platforms, content moderation practices are key. So they actually appreciate the chat filters and also the automatic detection of profanity, these kind of things, but they feel like, there's no way to replace the real human content moderator. So actually for big gaming companies like Valve and our company, they actually are criticized for like lack of real human moderators. And we also did studies for social VR, and we found that if people have different expectations to view and position social VR as something, they also influence their view toward the moderation features. For example, if user view social VR as more like a mediated reality, they actually want more autonomous control because they want to figure out what's going on and how they can respond to the social events and how they fit into different social circles. But if they view this more like a playground, usually these are the users from the US, more individualistic. They don't care about the moderation features, but they want more realism and more control for their personal information. And we also understand that, there are so many different expectations from different social roles, including parents and twins. All the platforms we all know, they're full of kids, right? So For the transparency and control, TTC Lab from Meta actually worked really hard with the experts and doing this co-designing plan and the project. They actually designed a series of parental moderation features, and they disable the chat function as a default for twins, for strangers and non-friends. So you cannot actually talk to anyone and hear anyone snoring or swearing near you. And I think it's a really great way to set as a default. And then the parents would know who wanted to add your kids as a friends or something. And it's different expectations, so it leads to different moderation features. And but I would like to talk about if we are thinking about whether the design of some of the voice features might let the users become over-reliant to this kind of features. For example, we need to think about bigger questions. Are we designing all these gentle reminders to facilitate or to prohibit positive potential social interactions? So for example, let me talk about the function of mute. Right? I always got notifications about two things about mute. The first one is someone muted me. Ouch, that hurts. What did I do? And then second thing is that it would just, someone's close to me and I hear they're talking, there's a reminder popping out, say, do you want to mute them? And I was like, why do I want to mute them? It's just like reality. Someone passing by, they're on their phone. Why do I mute them like that? I can't mute people in reality, but why do I want to mute them? So those kind of gentle reminder, I know they're protecting me, but they're kind of leading me into this, I only want to be in my personal bubble, not to interacting with others. People. So that thing can have different psychological effects on users. And the second thing is the voting system. I see kids voting to kick someone out all the time. And I had to drag into all the vote. I had no idea what's going on. I had to vote, okay, out. And I felt sorry that I just kicked someone out. So it's actually has become like a trolling practices or something. So we have to be really careful about how different age groups, how different cultures, how different expectations will feel this kind of moderation features.
Yeah. So, I mean, y'all both talked about the ways in which for voice, a foundational capability in social, there are actually a lot of really subtle tactics that we can get into to make the voice social experience more or less positive. I guess, Wes, I'm curious for sort of, voice and non-voice stuff. What are some more of those subtle tactics that y'all have learned at Riot or shared with Thriving?
Sure. Actually, to get into that, I kind of like to follow up on what Yasmin said a moment ago about how it's a small percentage of players. Here's a stat to remember: 5 versus 95%. Now, they found this at Blizzard. We found this at Riot, that at most 5% of a community is consistently disruptive. And I am going to touch on this before. We don't say toxicity because toxicity is so big a brush. It means everything from fraud to cheating to someone annoyed you that day. So I recommend specificity over toxicity. But just the same, as a bucket, about 5%. Less than 1% are the really egregious folks. And so in reality, there are no toxic communities. That doesn't mean you don't have the reputation, and trust me, I know that better than many. But it should give you some hope, right? And that's also a reason why you don't stay too much in focusing on the bad or prioritizing the good, because you're going to find there's this big area in between. And also you don't have to do all this stuff. So coming to like what things that you can do. Starting with intervention systems, real-time interventions work really well. We have something called RTI for League of Legends, real-time interventions. It auto-mutes folks in the moment. It is incredibly effective. We didn't tell players we were going to do it, but they noticed overnight, and it was very popular and it's very effective. But these systems are only as good as players are bad, right? And less good does not actually less bad does not create more good. So what are tactics you can do? Well, if you're going to build trust, it can be really easy. An example from Rec Room, their paddleball game. Low stakes, reciprocal mechanics, those types of off-task moments can do wonders for making a human space. And actually with that, the friendship formula. You'll find that if you ever read about Project Horseshoe, it will tell you proximity, similarity, familiarity, creating shared spaces, giving people like things to do. This has even been proven by the FBI. and CIA, they use this to get to know someone. I know it's a bit of a stretch, but to show you that this isn't something folks have made up. This is how people work. And there's a ton of other things that you can do. We've identified 12 more than the friendship formula. So any game that has an external threat is an opportunity to build bonds. But ultimately, what you want to do, the real goal, I think, among others, is building resilience in individuals and communities. Because if the values that you reinforce throughout your game, starting with code of conduct, it's an obvious thing, but if you don't draw a line, you really don't have a place to say that to folks that, well, you crossed one. So no, draw the line. Start building values, reinforce them, because when they're internalized, players can go all those miles that we can't. Unless your game is called Police State, you can't be in there policing things all the time. People want a voice and they want a choice. And there's a slew of other tools you can use. And something that we'll probably talk about at some point, but the Digital Thriving Playbook is meant to be the resource to give you these things. If you want to design for pro-social at scale, there's something called the chapters method. If you want to look at what I was saying before around like the whole river, environment, consequences, encouragement, there's a tool for that. It's called ECE, and you can plan for it. And get real familiar with pro-social behaviors. It can take just a list. And the last thing, and this is where I really recommend, and this is actually how we met, was through an exercise where map out your experience, find a list, we have one, of sources of human conflict. Because you're going to find, if you map out your game and you look for it, you're going to find places that your game may be creating conflict that you didn't intend. We call it design-driven conflict. So being conscious of this and then thinking about where am I at that point in the river? What tools can we use? There are a lot of tactics, but I won't take any more time on that. It's a pretty big topic.
Well, and there's even more resources that we'll direct y'all to after this. And that was such a powerful exercise. I remember doing this at GDC, this workshop, really amazing. So Yasmin, Wes had talked a little bit about the some of these small mechanics in Rec Room that have made social a little bit smoother. What other things, kind of subtle design tactics from Rec Room, have y'all seen contribute to positive play?
So firstly, thank you for asking this question.
Yeah.
I love that trust and safety is expanding into thinking about these types of issues and how we really have, it's not just about some policies and then content moderation. It really is going back to design fundamentals. For the trust and safety people in the room, if there are any, your game designer colleagues will want to talk to you about this. This is where they are willing to chat to me at Rec Room. When I want to go and talk to them about a very detailed content moderation issue, less keen. This one they're up for. This is fun. So I think the first thing is you have this stuff underneath in your control. You can design as a game designer, actually much easier than in the real world, your entire space. And so mapping that journey, thinking through how a user or a player will experience it, and then thinking about what are the little things you could drop in to make this easier. And I can't take credit for this. Rec Room started long before I joined, but there were two principles that Rec Room really took in as the fundamental. One was ground yourself in the familiar, and I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. And the other was bias towards physical interactions and affordances. And that has really allowed us to build out these subtle things to make for a more pro-social experience. So grounding in the familiar, Rec Room, I started saying this, we provide first-party content, you have our rooms and our games to go and play, but we're also a UGC world. There are millions of rooms. You can go and do anything. You can be on a skyloft, you can be in a mountain, you can be in an alien invasion world. Our players are incredibly creative, normally for the good, 95% of the time. But so I guess we could have just spawned you into any of those when you load in, but we don't. We have a very familiar, very reassuring campus that everyone knows. When you spawn in, you're in a dorm room, not particularly ambitious, not lofty, but comforting and reassuring. Your safe space that you can go back to at any moment. No one can get to it unless you invite them. the first places where you interact with other players are a rec centre. They're the park, the field. And then we dropped in some little things that could help you interact. So at the moment, we have pop-up games where you can ask non-controversial questions like, should pineapple be on pizza? To start the conversation in a very low-touch way. It's not high stakes. But there were other things. The paddleball was mentioned, but there's also a basketball hoop with a basketball. You can wander in on your own. You could start shooting some hoops. Someone could come over and join you. It's all about removing those barriers for friendly, kind interactions. And then on the kind of the physical side, I'll say a couple of things. I know we're running short of time. We started as VR, and so we had this great opportunity to bias towards those physical interactions. So everything around making friends and being friendly is done through your interaction. So if you do a thumbs up, you can give someone a cheer. They can respond to that by celebrating your cheer. You can give a cheer because they were a good sport, they were kind, they were helpful, anything. When they respond to your cheer, confetti kind of comes down around both of you. Everyone can see that you two just had a positive interaction in that space. It spreads happiness. It's really simple. Fist bumps. You do a fist bump, you're that in a party, you can now travel to another room together super easily. You're in a little group. So, there's a whole range of these little high fives. I should mention the high fives. You can revive your teammate with a high five. This whole range of interactions that are all designed to make it easy to be friendly and make friends and remove those conflict barriers.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things about, as a kind of shy person myself, I love those moments in VR when there's a small thing that you can use as a bridge to a social interaction with other people and that they can use as a bridge into social interaction with you. I'm curious, there's a lot of different players, different ages, regions, cultures that come together in our spaces. So maybe just kind of a couple quick thoughts, Tammy, and then we'll get to you, West, on what does it look like to design for multiple minds? What are different player cultures or backgrounds or experiences, and how do we accommodate for those in our experiences?
When we heard the term, there's a term called global village by Marshall McLuhan. It was coined by when there's an internet. So if he thought that with the internet, the whole world will become a village, and that didn't happen, right? But when we look at social VR, it's actually global village right now because you actually encounter so many different age groups and cultural people. So it struck us. I work with Dr. Yuhao Li from University of Florida. So we started to comparing users from Taiwan and users from the US. We wanted to see how different cultures of people with different cultural dimension, which is individualism versus collectivism, how this cultural orientation will influence their perception toward the social VR and influence their social comfort levels. We did 2 studies. The first one, we just let them enter the social world and the social VR to explore around. We found that people from Taiwan who are more collectivism, they feel this as a mediated reality. So they're seriously trying to build conversations and then build friendships and connections with others. They heavily rely on facial expressions and body gestures and body movement. These are nonverbal cues to determine what is the social norm with this group. Should I continue the conversation? Should I drop, or should I just listen? So they really care about this. So they feel this is immediate reality. Their enjoyment came from their connections, who they socialize with in the experiences. So if those people are nice to them, they got enjoyed, and if they don't, they got frustrated and escaped. So this is very key for them. And for the US people who are more individualistic, they feel this more as a playground. So they heavily rely on the verbal cues, like the verbal words, and also they heavily rely on what Yasmin just mentioned, the platform facilitative features. For example, the playful playground or the playful floors that you can become a play field or something to facilitate. So they want these features to be the social lubricant to facilitate and to initiate these kind of things when you run out of topics and you don't know how to start a conversation. So they actually want more realistic representation of themselves, so they focus more on the realism and the platform facilitation. So these are the two different things, and we concluded that for Taiwanese users who are more collectivists, they want more safety and control regarding the relational connections, but the US users want more safety and control in their personal information. In the second study, we found that, again, Taiwanese users compared with US users, Taiwanese users heavily rely on the facial cues, right? So the more facial cues or the facial expressions they have, for example, you have Quest Pro who, supported all the facial expressions, the more social presence they feel. It means that they feel like, oh, we're actually together in the same room with a shared presence with other people around and having real interactions. And then they will have greater enjoyment and greater impression and better impression and greater trust toward the other who are interacting with them. So these are all the cues that are afforded by different things, and we can see how different cultures and cultural dimensions to influence their social comfort levels when they're in social world and social VR.
Right. So, Wes, I stole a phrase of yours earlier, the designing for multiple minds. But I think Tammy,
appreciate
yeah, it's a good expression. Y'all should look up that article. But Tammy, I think you nailed it. Wes, I guess as we are kind of coming up to the end here, if you could think about how this fits into a business case, how we can actually sell this kind of work to the rest of our teams to make sure that we're actually investing in it, and what kind of positive outcomes we see for our business as a result.
Well, hopefully I can do this pretty quickly. I've said this so many times. One, you can proactively reduce disruptive behavior. Don't wait for it. If you choose to wait, you choose to lose. Right? You can make your games more socially satisfying. That's the stickiness, right? If you make it rewarding, social rewards are what make those social interactions valuable to you as a company. Don't treat social as a feature. It is a system driven by trust. And to really get into some business speak, you will increase engagement, retention, and monetization. And I'll give you a specific way how. Players with an extended trusted network of playmates, not just friends. Let me emphasize that, not just friends. They stay, play, and pay more, right? You build an environment that produces that. As I said before, they thrive, we thrive.
Brilliant. Thank you. Please grab these QR codes. They're incredible resources our panelists have put together. If you want to continue the journey, we'll be here. We'll be outside in the hall. Come find us if you have questions. But thank you so much, and please thank our panelists. This has been fantastic.